Welcome to the Regeneration Ministries podcast. This is Josh Glazer. I'm the Executive Director of Regeneration Ministries. We know being a human being can be beautiful, and it can also be messy. We're this combination of physical, emotional, sexual, relational, and spiritual. Jesus knows this too. So each week in this podcast, we address topics to help you become more whole, more the men and women that God designed you to be. I'm here with Kit Elmer from our staff team and Shannon, who's one of our leaders and who has an amazing voice. You'll hear it. She's not going to sing for us on this, but you going to sing for us, Shannon? No, she's not going to sing for us. But they were talking about something, and we decided we really need to make this a podcast because it's such an important topic for so many different people. So very briefly, we're going to talk today about detaching and love. And I think for a lot of us, those two words, detaching and love, sound like they really do not belong together. Well, how can you love if you're detaching? It sounds like they're polar opposites, but they're not. They're actually really, really, really important. So Shannon, this came up because you were sharing with Kit some of the ways this was impacting you. So why don't we start there? Just share a little about what you were discovering, what's happening for you.
Okay. So really, I really didn't know or had ever heard of the term detaching and love. It didn't come up for me until I realized that a very significant relationship of mine had very muddy boundaries. And as I was walking through that season, what was happening was I was realizing that my expectations for that person in that relationship was off. I was expecting things that this person could not give. And so I was in this place of just a lot of tension relationally, and I didn't know what to do about it. And in that tension, I'm sure it was in talking and coaching and things like that, this topic came up of detaching and love. And is like you said, they kind of seem like the two words don't go together. Because I think in our culture, we hear detaching and that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
Like, well, I shouldn't detach because I love this person. Where it's a completely different, it's kingdom thought to detach and love. So once I kind of was understanding that and understanding right expectations and understanding right boundaries, I was able to see actually it can be a good thing to take a step back, assess the relationship, and see, well, actually, like, where are we right now? Like, what's happening? And we're not in a place where I can be with you. We're not, it's not good for us to be together, but I still love you. I still wish you well. I still pray for you. I still think about you. It's not like I'm detaching, see ya, have a nice life. You can still be in relationship with someone and be very present with them, but to detach in a healthy way. And it all had to do with boundaries, expectations, all of that kind of rolled into one. So
yeah, so let's dive into, let's talk just very briefly about boundaries, because I think without an understanding about what boundaries are, I think we're going to get kind of hung up on detaching love. So then I want to kind of roll into, and Kit, you can speak to this. What are we talking about when we're talking about detaching and love? Like, Shannon, you shared an example of this. There are lots of examples of why and how and when this is necessary and really vital. So boundaries, in brief, the way I like to think about them is they're just lines. They're visible or invisible lines that delineate one thing from another. They're all over the place. You know, there's the shore is a boundary between the sea and the land, and when that is crossed one way or the other, all sorts of damage is done. God has really clear boundaries. I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I am not like the gods of the Babylons, or et cetera, et cetera. So, and he invites us to have boundaries. There are things that we are and things that we are not, each of us individually, and all of us collectively. So, Kit, take that from there. I'm passing you the baton.
You know, you said something earlier when we were, before we started, about God being so clear, being able to detach and love and having boundaries. He doesn't invade us. He invites us. And his love is characterized by freedom, not control. And so when we're in relationship, and a lot of times this idea of boundaries and detaching and love comes up when there's maybe some difficulty or some toxicity, not always, but sometimes. And then you realize that you're leaning really far in, trying to control and manage and maneuver this relationship when it's really not yours to do that. And so you have to step back and you have to detach in love, not in control, not in rejection, but just in love, and let that person be who they are. But you don't have to receive and take personally some of the dynamics that are going on.
So how would we define, like, let's just take a couple stabs at what does it mean to detach and love? Like, if you were to look it up in the dictionary, which you're not going to be able to do, like, what would the definition of detaching and love be? What are some of the definitions that we could put to it?
Honoring yourself and honoring the other person as different than you.
Yeah.
This individuation thing that kids do that's really hard for parents. We do it. We need to do it with each other. We need to allow, Shannon needs to be Shannon's own self, own person, and I need to be mine. And I don't control her. She needs to have the honor from me to be who she is.
Yeah, that's great. So say the very first part of that again. It's honoring myself and honoring the other as other.
As other.
Yeah.
Honoring the other. I do love that term too. Honoring the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we're different. It's good. God made, us extremely unique from one another in his image.
I think it too, like what's coming to mind is knowing what's mine. Like if I know what's mine and I know what's not mine in the relationship, like that can be muddy too in relationships with unclear boundaries.
Yes.
And so if I'm taking on things that aren't mine, it's not a healthy relationship. And so even that, I think that was in my own experiences, those were areas where I was realizing this relationship is actually running a lot of my life right now. This relationship is causing me to change my normal behavior patterns, or fill in the blanks. And so once I was able to see, well, that's not mine. That's yours. That's not mine. And so I can release that.
And when you say that, you're talking about. I mean, I have too many kids. I'm thinking about Finding Nemo. The seagulls who are like mine. But you're talking about like. What do you mean when you say this is like, what kinds of stuff is mine that can get confused, that needs to be clarified?
What can be like if this other person in the relationship has issues or struggles or codependency, like that it all kind of weaves around this topic of detaching and love. It has to do with boundaries, expectations, again, like ownership, knowing who I am, knowing who you are, and how do we walk in this right relationship together. When there's times when I can see actually what's going on right now is changing me. What's going on right now in this relationship is I'm starting to downward spiral because of what's happening in this relationship. There's a point where you have to take a step and look and say, okay, what's happening here? And either we can establish a right boundary, or there might be a season that actually I'm going to detach and love. I'm going to say, this is not good for us to be together. I still love you, but we're not good together.
So Kit, you used the word earlier, toxic.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's one of the probably the most pronounced places where it's like, oh man, there really needs to be a detachment here. Shannon, you used the word emotional dependency, I think. Like there's that kind of bleeding of our identities where it's like, if boundaries are visible, it's like somehow they've, somebody splashed water on the page and the colors are starting to bleed. And you're like, wait, who am I? Who are you? Like, what do I have to own in this conversation? Is that what I'm feeling, or is that what you're feeling? Is that what I'm going through? Is that what you're going through? Is this my problem, or is this your problem? And I think one of the places it comes in, like as Christians. So I'm just going to push back here, not because I disagree with what you guys are saying, but as Christians, like, love your neighbor as yourself. So I mean, I think some of our listeners will be like, whoa, wait. Like, sometimes we have to really enter into another person's struggle, and we have to be there for them. So respond to that.
By their choice. You don't force yourself on them. Of course, we're available to help people when they invite us, when they're like, I want you to help me, but we can't decide that they need our help. That's not our decision to make. And I think a lot of times what we're talking about is in toxicity, where, or it often happens in parent-child relationships where our tendency is to want to tell our children, we want to control their lives. And we have authority over them and we can guide them, but we can't fix, control, rescue, and make their life our own. So
when you talk about being invited, I certainly see that's one of those places. So somebody's not asking for our help. Somebody isn't wanting our involvement. And so detaching in love in that way is like, hey, actually, you need to respect their boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
They're not asking you to be. I think the other place that I've seen this is where the other person really, 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 really wants your help. They're asking for your help. They're coming after you. Like you're the only one who can help me with this.
Fix me.
Fix me. Like you're such a good listener. You understand me. You get me. Like, and that's one of those places where I think it can be really. Maybe that's just part of my personality, but it can be really hard for me to say, hold on. Like I do love you, and yet I can go thus far and no farther. Shannon, you were going to say something too, I think.
But no, I totally agree. Like, it's not my job to fix everyone. It's not my job to fix anyone, except, so, right, how does that, again, walking in right boundary, even if they want me to help them, is that mine? So it goes back to that same, what's mine? Like, who am I? What's for me in this relationship?
So guys, how do you differentiate? Like, say a person's going, well, I don't know. I mean, are they saying I need to detach from this situation? Like, how do you know, or like what would be some signposts, some warning signs, some yellow flags or red flags? Like, this is a sign maybe that you need to detach in love, as opposed to, no, this is just a hard situation you're walking through with somebody and it is loving. Like, what some of the warning signs for people?
It's a great question. Mm-hmm. I think when we begin to be each other's saviors, like, I can fix you. And then it becomes about, like, this is what I'm going to do for you. And I'm the one who's going to do it for you, and vice versa. You're the only one that can fix me. Then it becomes very unhealthy. When two healthy people are saying, I'm struggling and I need your help. I need to talk with you about this or pray with you. And you're able to do that without it becoming this thing that you're owning that's not yours to own. Mm-hmm. Everybody has to own what's theirs to own and not own what's theirs to own. And so, if you have a healthy view of yourself, a lot of times this comes up when there's some real questions about our self-love or self-rejection. If we're feeling poorly about ourselves, we're going to look to other people to do things for us that they can't do.
Mm. So that's one warning sign. Shannon, you used the word earlier, spiraling. Mm-hmm. I think earlier you were talking about just getting confused about, like, who am I? Like, can we put some words to that, or like where are the flags there? Where might somebody say, like?
Sure. I think for me, like, looking back at, like, when I was really wrestling with this specifically, I was seeing where I was changing from who I am. And so, like, typically, you have your responsibilities, the things that you do, and I was putting this relationship above those.
Can you give an example, like, just to make it more concrete for people?
I don't know if I can. I'm trying to think of how to protect the relationship.
Okay. Well, let me give a hypothetical example.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's a real example, but it's concrete. But I think like if there are other obligations that you have, like, I think so for people who are in families or who have jobs or other ministry obligations, and they begin those things begin to suffer because somebody's pouring their time. I think one common one could be a husband and a wife where one of the spouses is struggling with an addiction or a problem, and one spouse is kind of like, I'm gonna help get you better, and they're making the phone calls, they're making the appointments. Mm. I can't tell you the number of times people call our office, husband or wife calls our office and says, "Can you meet with my spouse?" And we say, "Well, sure," if they call us. Mm. There needs to be some detachment and love there. I think another example would be if somebody is in a family or ministry obligation, or has a ministry obligation, and they are actually not doing the work that is given them to do, that's on their plate to do. Their family is suffering, or their job is suffering because they're spending so much time trying to kind of pull this other person up. Mm-hmm. I think that can be another indicator of, like, it looks like you're trying to save this person as opposed to just being there with them or for them or walking with them.
Right, like that relationship kind of ends up superseding anything else.
Yeah.
Anything else that are normal things that I need to manage and take care of in my life, responsibilities, relationships, whatever, at the drop of a hat. Oh no, this person's calling, this person needs me, this person's hurt, this person, fill in the blanks. I need to drop that. This is going to supersede any of my other responsibilities. I think that's a pretty big warning sign.
Yeah.
And affect your well-being.
Right.
It's not just that you see a valid need that might interrupt your life. It's that your whole state of well-being is contingent upon if they're okay or not.
Right.
And if they're not okay, then you're not okay. And so every time they have an issue, your well-being is up and down because of that.
And that does happen in life. There are things, my daughter breaks her arm. Let's stop everything, take her to the hospital. There are things that are going to happen. But then when you have a relationship where this is a constant thing, this is something that, the phone's ringing. Is it them? Is there a problem? Like there kind of becomes a
defining of you.
Yes, and I'm going to take it because I feel obligated, or I'm going to take it because let me drop everything, and that's going to supersede everything else. I think that was a pretty prominent one for me.
Yeah. So let me ask this question. We've talked about the detached part. How is this loving? Because I think that's kind of one of the pulls or the hooks that kind of pull us back in. Is like, for me to say, the phone's ringing, I know who it is, and for me to ignore the call knowing they're in distress, or for me to pick up the call and say, I can't talk to you right now, I have other things I need to do. Or even to say, you need to do this for yourself. You need to go take care of this, So how is that loving?
Well,
Go ahead.
detach and love is actually a recovery term, and so is enabling. And so, the idea of the negative aspect of not detaching in love is that you're enabling. Like, so when you are always at someone's beck and call and you're not allowing them to get the help they need or to get stronger, to own their own life, and they're putting everything on you and saying, no, but you're going to fix me, you're going to be the thing, then you're enabling them. You're not allowing them to get well. And another recovery term is tough love. It is loving to say, I can't help you. I can't, if I do that, if when you speak to me really rudely and unkindly and I say, that's okay, that's not loving to me or to you to allow that to happen.
Mm-hmm. It's like I think in a lot of those situations, you're basically cushioning somebody from living in the reality of their own choices,
yep.
Which isn't respectful of their identity. It's their life. God has given them this life and trusted it to them, and for us to try to kind of buffer the decisions they're making as a way to try to protect them. And I think in the end, in a lot of those situations, it's actually just trying to protect us from the pain of seeing somebody spiral or get hurt more.
Yeah. I would say two things about just the in love.
Yeah,
How do we do the in love part? The first thing is just something that I try to practice is always remembering, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. So if that's my view of you, if I don't take that view, then I'm going to blame you. Like, you know what you're doing here. And to some extent, like, people make decisions purposefully to behave a certain way. But if that's my heart's posture towards this person, Father, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. I'm going to look at them out of love versus out of accusation of like, why are you doing this to me, or why are you doing this to yourself? And so I kind of take that posture. And that's just helpful for me, just subconsciously, to always be like, have that in mind.
Yeah.
The other thing that was coming to mind, just as we were working up to this topic, one of the verses that kept coming to mind were how there's no greater love than for a man to lay down his life for his friends. Or that's a loose translation. That kept coming to mind, and I was just like, Lord, why does that verse keep coming to mind lately? And what I started thinking about was I might be taking this verse completely out of context, I'm not sure. But like, here we have, Jesus laying down his life, like, I'm going to die for you. Like, you're dying of self. And so when I'm laying down myself, when I'm laying down my expectations for this person, my expectations, you don't have to look like what I'm expecting you to look like. I'm going to die to that. I love you so much that I'm not going to hold you to what I think is right. We're not right together, and that's okay. But I love you, and so I'm going to die to that. Does that kind of make sense? And so I was just trying to like wrap my mind around that. And so how much like that in some ways, like, I'll jump in front of a car for you feels easier than actually laying down my expectations for someone.
Yeah.
In some ways, that feels more difficult. And so I think, again, in that posture of, I love you and I see that you're not well, you're not making right choices, and this relationship, the boundaries have gotten muddy. I see that, but I love you and I'm going to lay down my expectations of what I want this relationship to look like because I love you, because I don't want to be angry, because I don't want to look at you in an accusational way, or in, like, I don't want to not, I want to be able to honor you in the relationship. And so if I'm able to die to myself in that way, it definitely comes out of a heart, out of a love posture.
There's the need for, like, some people who need to detach and love are kind of they're the helpers. I want to get in there and make a difference for somebody.
Rescue.
Yeah,
fix.
and that person may really be asking for it, but it's like, they need me, that kind of thing. Another kind of person might be the person that's not their personality in general, but they're in a toxic relationship, maybe with an unhealthy boss or a pastor or somebody or a husband or wife who's just putting stuff on them, and they need to say, hold on, like this, I'm not going to own your stuff anymore, what you're putting on me. That's you, not me. And then the third, I feel like there's a third, but I can't remember.
I think the third one is when you're just trying to honor the fact that you're different people. And, that one person might be like, stepping back and being more reserved, and you're taking it personally, like, why aren't you more like me? Why don't you come closer to me? And then you need to detach and love and say, okay, that's not what I would say or do,
Right, and
but
just
that's
knowing,
what they say or do.
knowing that's okay. I think especially with husbands and wives, or there's people in the same job, or people in the same church who get, like, you know what, it's okay that we're different.
Yes.
And that's actually a loving thing, just to detach from each other a little bit with that.
And with the toxic part, it can also be this idea of enabling. Like you might not be a helper so much in the situation on either side, but someone is behaving in such a way, either demanding or being unkind, maybe even emotionally abusive, and you have to say, that's not okay. Yeah. I'm detaching in love. I'm not rejecting you, but I am stepping back in love and respect for myself and for you, not to feed into that.
You can be in any of these scenarios and not realize that you're in it. You don't realize your desire to help this person is not in a right boundary. Your desire to, well, this person's calling me, let me get it, let me answer it, let me respond. That's not loving myself well, and that's not loving them well. It can be, but I think that's what's important, is what I've learned is to pause, to be able to pause, to be able to have a level of self-awareness, to pay attention to your body. What's going on in me when I'm responding to this person? Why am I eating more? Why do I want to drink? Why am I want to retreat. I want to go away, fill in the blanks. But I think it's really important to be able to pay attention to how your body is reacting in a relationship. And what was really helpful to me was finding a person to talk to, was, spending time with Jesus, talking to him about it, the community around me, to be able to say, hey, actually, we noticed this difference in you, or maybe you can go about this a different way, or maybe this isn't a right relationship. I think all of those things are good to just periodically have ourselves in check, because we can be in a relationship where we may need to detach and love and we don't realize it. So it's just really important to be able to get help and maybe ask the people around you.
So we have to wrap up. Before we do, I want to just come around to this reality that we, coming back to these two initially seemingly contradictory terms, detaching in love, that this is actually, Shannon, you're getting at this, like this is exactly what God does. God is always very, very clear about who he is, and very, very clear about who we are. And he is completely willing to enter into our mess, but he will not, first of all, I mean, I love in the passage in Revelation, I stand at the door and I knock. Like he doesn't, he could bust the door down. He could, disintegrate the door. Like, he stands at the door and he knocks.
He doesn't have to knock.
That's right. But he chooses to. He respects our boundaries, who we are. And I think on the flip side of that, he never assumes, and I mean that in the sense of taking on. He never takes on the identity that we try to just attribute to him. He's always clear about who he is. And we have all sorts of, wacky ideas about who God is. And hopefully as we continue to grow in Christ, we get clearer and clearer about who he is. But he doesn't, sink down to who we've made him to be. He always remains exactly who he is, the great I am. So anyway, this Detaching and Love is really in many ways just about us becoming more like him and more able to
It's good.
receive who we are from him and to walk with others as they are, not as we wish they could be. So, Kit, would you just close us? Maybe specifically just pray for anybody who is listening going, I need some of that, and we'll end there.
Lord, it is so beautiful how you create us uniquely, each one of us. We are each, though, created in your image. And you, by design, Lord, create us to be honorable. And so, Lord, would you help each of us to embrace the person, the true self that you've created us to be, to embrace that, to ask you about it, to learn of it, and, Lord, to know that everybody else has that too. And it isn't our role to create our own identity or to create anybody else's. And so, Lord, would you help us to realize that we have a God-given identity, each one of us, and you want us to honor and respect and love that. Thank you, Lord. Amen.
Thank you so much for listening today. We hope this episode has been helpful to you. Listen, if you find these podcasts beneficial, please join our listening community and our larger ministry work in one of two ways. First, would you leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts? Doing so actually helps bring this content to more people like you who can benefit. And second, would you become a financial partner of the ministry by donating either one time or on a monthly basis? You can find out how to do so at regenerationministries.org/donate. Thank you so much again for listening. We look forward to being with you again next week.